I like crazy facts. I always have. I like discovering things or learning about things that are off the beaten path and then relaying that information to others. As a matter of fact, I spent the better half of a decade exploring things like philosophy and evolution and then turning what I'd learned into podcasts. The evolution podcast is still out there. No, there's not new episodes or anything. The philosophy one is long gone, but I still do explore and study philosophy, and you'll see that in some of the articles I write for the newsletter at The Joy of Vinyl. A little shameless plug there. But we're not here to talk about philosophy or podcasts or anything like that. What we're here to do today is talk about some crazy facts concerning that spinning black circle that we all enjoy. So let's get started. When we look at a record, it does appear to be simple enough, right? It's black, it has a groove, one groove, always one. Unless you get your hands on one of those unique discs that have two grooves that are meant to, kind of catch the listener off guard, depending on which groove, gets that stylus first. A recent example of that is Jack White's Lazarus record. And Monty Python did something similar, which, of course, they did. But there are some very fascinating things about that groove that come to light when you run a stylus through them. And it's not just music. There's a lot more happening in that groove than the recreation of a musical signal. One is temperature, and that led to a myth that you'll probably have heard before and will still hear in some places. The temperature at the point where the stylus meets the groove can actually exceed 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees Celsius. Now, that's a lot of pressure and friction there. And this is why you'll hear the claim that you should let a record rest after playing it and not play it multiple times. And that myth goes, if you play a record multiple times in the same day, you risk groove damage because those high temperatures I mentioned will melt the groove. That is simply not true. The high temperature, yes, it does happen, but it's at a microscopic point of contact and for an exceedingly minuscule amount of time. The surrounding material works like a heat sink. The heat is drawn away quickly. So within a fraction of a millisecond, that stylus is on its way and you'd never know the difference, and neither does the groove. And here's another fun little fact. If you were to shrink down to become small enough to catch a ride on the cantilever, you wouldn't last long. You would probably die. And it's not just because of the heat. It's because of the geometry of the groove itself. Back in the day, a long time ago, records were just made in mono. And before stereo, the stylus would just move left and right in the groove. It was lateral movement. In the late 1950s, Westrex, which was an offshoot of Western Electric, turned the groove into a 3D-shaped wave. And this forces the stylus to not only go right and left, but up and down as well. And why? Stereo. It's an engineering marvel, in fact. It's designed so that the groove, or the stylus, when it tracks the groove, goes from the top left to the bottom right, and vice versa from the top right to the bottom left, and it just keeps on going back and forth, up and down. Now imagine hanging on to the cantilever while it's doing that. But that's not the worst part. The bucking bronco motion isn't what will kill you. It's the G-force. Yes, the G-force. The acceleration as that stylus goes back and forth and up and down can get up to hundreds or even thousands of Gs. Sincerely, that's crazy. And because the stylus changes directions thousands of times, the amount of force needed to move that is insane. One calculation I came across says it's 26,000 meters per second squared. Why squared? I have no idea. I'm not an engineer, and this stuff breaks my brain. But one little cool fact about all that is 26,000 meters per second squared is equal to 2,600 Gs, and that's 2,600 times the normal gravity that we experience here on Earth. And to put that into perspective, a fighter pilot can withstand around, I think, 9 Gs. 6 Gs for a prolonged period of time can be fatal. So imagine 2,600 Gs. So between the heat and the pressure and the G-forces, that cantilever is a very hazardous place to hang out. And the craziness doesn't just end at the cantilever. Remember, where that point of contact is, it's creating a sound. It's creating a signal. And that sound or that signal is basically a funhouse mirror when it leaves the cartridge and travels along the wire to be heard as music. And if you heard it without a preamp or a phono stage, it would sound tinny or hollow. And why is that? There's a lot of information there, and that information is eventually held in the groove. And the bass of the sound, or that signal, which eventually becomes sound, the bass contains the most information. So if you were to cut a groove without taking that into account, the stylus would pretty much just fly out of the groove. And to get around that and keep it from happening, engineers cut the bass and boost the treble before they even cut that groove. This allows the stylus to remain in the groove. But you then have to reverse all of that before it reaches the speakers. And that's what your preamp or phono stage does. It's pretty much magic. Well, it's engineering and science. Now, there's a lot of crazy facts that we can explore, but I'll give you one more today. It's inner groove distortion. It's real, and there's nothing you can do about it. I've seen folks talk about it and say that you can solve it. You can't solve it because it's basic geometry. And I should know, because I suck at geometry. I think I got a D in geometry. Probably actually flunked it. My first D in my life was algebra. Math scares me, so that's why I had to beat my head against the keyboard to wrap my mind around this. Now, with proper cartridge alignment, you can reduce or mitigate the amount of inner groove distortion that you experience, but you can't get rid of it. It's baked into the medium. I mean, literally baked into the medium. A record at its outer edge is roughly 37 inches. So when you run it at 33 RPM or 33 and a third RPM, the stylus rushes through it at around 1.8 seconds. It's going fast, so the resolution is high. As things progress, as the record, spins, you might begin to notice something. Things begin to drop in volume. Not substantially, and mastering for vinyl can mitigate this, but you really notice it when you flip the record and side 2, that first song in side 2 is a bit louder sounding than the last song in side 1. But I digress. We're talking about inner groove distortion. The inner edge of the record as the stylus nears the end of the side is about 18 inches. So remember, at the beginning it was around 37, so we've cut it a bit more in half to get to that, inner groove area. And the record is still spinning at 33 RPM. So the stylus has to squeeze out the same amount of information or music with half the physical space. And no amount of mastering can change that. The music is still going at the same speed, but it's all crammed into a smaller space. Look at it this way. Let's do an experiment. This Sharpie in my hand is the stylus, and the ink inside represents the music. And this piece of paper we'll call the record. Now, if I take this Sharpie and draw a picture on this paper, you can make it out. I'm really no artist, but at least it looks like something. The resolution there isn't so bad. Now, what if I draw the same picture in less space? We'll use the same Sharpie, but instead of the paper, we'll use a Post-it note. Wow, that looks awesome. Inner groove distortion. With this Sharpie and that Post-it note using the same picture, it will never look great or sound great. That's why some engineers will put a simpler song at the end of a side, just like it's easier to draw a simple picture on this Post-it note than something that's, a little bit more complicated. Now, if an artist or producer insists on placing a song that's very complex at the end of a side, maybe it's for emotional strength or something, or maybe all of their music is dynamic and, has a lot of layers to it, the cutting engineer has some tricks up their sleeve. They can lower the level or adjust the stereo field or something. They can adjust the highs and lows. Whatever is done, the song will never sound as good as it would at the outer edge of the record. I love records, but damn, their physicality does impose problems. But when it all falls into place, and that's about it. I really want to thank you for watching. It means a lot to me that you do. And I did mention earlier, there is a weekly newsletter. It comes out on Saturdays, and usually there's an article or two in there that I wouldn't put here on the channel. It's things that I think about, things that have to do with records and the whole playback experience. There's all sorts of things in that newsletter. Would love to have you join. But more importantly, until next time, take care of yourself and enjoy your records. I'll see you soon.